Now it says it's being recorded. Are we ready? Okay. I believe we're live. I will call this regular meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 6 p.m. And the first item on the agenda is a roll call. Mr. Giuffre.
Mr. Daugherty.
Here.
Reverend Eilert.
Here.
Dr. Lorenz.
Here.
Dr. Schwetchner.
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. All 5 board members present. We are in the Loveland Intermediate Middle School Media Center having this meeting, but it is also being streamed live and is being recorded. First item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Washburn moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And Reverend Eilert seconded. You will note, I believe the only change from when the agenda went live last week is a couple of additions to the HR items, but otherwise I think we're at the same agenda. Any questions or discussion about the agenda? Mr. Giuffre, can we vote?
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty.
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Dr. Schwetchner.
Yes.
Motion carried. The first item on that agenda is to approve the minutes of the September 20th, 2022 board business meeting. And I'll move that we approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Swetchenow seconded. Any corrections, additions, discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
Schwetchner.
Yes.
Mr. Daugherty.
Yes.
Reverend Eilert.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. Now I'd like to welcome our guests this evening. We do have quite a few. We have quite a few administrators here. We have some guests back here that probably our audience, our live audience or our streaming audience can't see, but you know you're here. And we are glad you're here. We will ask that anyone who was interested in speaking to the board for public participation should have already signed up, but if you haven't, there's a sign up over there that you would please do before we get to public participation. And I'll ask you now to rise and join with us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
2 flags.
You were the one stuck between.
Yes, okay. Well, usually we have an Ohio flag, but we have 2 American flags and they're not leaning anymore. So I'm happy to see. 2 flags is better than none. So. All right. Again, the next item on our agenda is hearing of the public. Mr. Giuffre, I think you have some folks who have signed in.
I do, and I'm
And then
going to
I
need a
s-
timekeeper because I left my phone in the car.
Uh-oh.
If we want one of
I'll
our
volunteer.
students. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do see someone else signing in over there. So
All right.
we'll add that one on. How many do we have, Mr. Giuffre?
So far, we have 4 and now 5.
That would be 5. Okay.
And
As noted in our agenda, people speaking should provide their name and address. If you're affiliated with a group or an agenda item, you should mention that. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address any one particular topic or item. Several people wish to speak. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes until a total time of 30 minutes is used. During that time period, no person may speak twice until all who desire to speak have had the opportunity to do so. Mr. Giuffre, who's on first?
first is Leslie Hodge.
I've appreciated having conversations with some of you individually, and I appreciate this opportunity to address all of you. For those of us opposing the levy, the themes of trust and transparency are the same as they were 3 years ago, because in 3 years, they have either been inadequately addressed or dismissed, or even now are currently mocked. Lack of trust stems from several actions in the recent past. Although some of you were not involved in those actions, the history did not go away when you arrived, and you cannot evade the effect. Trust is impaired when it becomes difficult get accurate, timely, complete, and clear answers to questions, and when people who ask questions are vilified and accused of using up district time and resources. It is difficult to trust the district when we are subjected to fear-mongering statements or the constant emotional mantra that it's about the kids. It's obvious you are passionate about students, but I haven't met anyone in our community who doesn't support kids. The bottom line is levies are always about more money. Public education exists by benefit from the taxpayer, whose role should not simply be reduced to the payer of the bills. While it is understandable that you have inflationary costs, it does not justify why the district should be able to insulate itself at taxpayers' expense from the inflationary effects that everyone else has to deal with. The usual response for a common household in inflationary times is to spend less. To expect the common household to spend less while also paying higher taxes so that school does not need to spend less shows little respect for the community and especially the families your students live in. In regards to the lack of transparency, I have time to name only a few recent examples, such as the implication there were no raises because the pay scale remained the same, when in fact teacher salaries were increased by other mechanisms. We have generously paid employees in Loveland, and we know that unions protect adults, not children. What is the honest truth about where and what monies will be spent to maintain current educational programming? Well, I give Mr. Giuffre credit for making the contingency fund a line item in the projected budget. Money is fungible, and what was never discussed clearly was how the manipulation of money into a rainy day fund affects the cash balances and deficit spending line. Why does the school levy literature never mention this is a permanent levy? You are transparent when the data is highly marketable and not so transparent when the data isn't so favorable. While trust and transparency remain casualties in our district, the unfortunate fallout of recent levies, including this one, is a fostering of two-way divisive partisanship in our community. Many who aren't in favor of this levy tell us they stay quiet for fear of retaliation and bullying from pro-levy supporters. What a sad commentary on our inability to have civil, honest, and open discourse when we strongly disagree. To which I say, Loveland, you've lost that Loveland feeling. Now it's gone, gone, gone.
Thank you.
Next, we have Linda Holtkamp.
Good evening. I know that you and the community don't have to be convinced because you're living it every day, but maybe some on the board need a reminder. Our economy is in a tatters, and that's a fact. 401k retirement plans are down 20 to 25% this year, with 7% mortgages maybe reaching 8% by year's end. Housing values are likely to drop maybe by a lot. Then there's this. Year over year inflation numbers. Gasoline is up 20% to $4 a gallon. 2 years ago, it was $2. Food at a restaurant up 91%, and that's how we get to a $15 sandwich. Natural gas up 33%, electric for home heating up 16% year over year. Just wow. Mortgage rates soar, now at 7%. That average $367,000 house in Loveland last year had a mortgage of about $1,600 a month. It's now $2,600 a month. We will not be seeing a huge influx of young families, not at these rates. Add in sky-high property taxes and insurance, hundreds of dollars more per month. Only the wealthy will be able to come to Loveland. Eggs and butter, health insurance, medicine, clothing, meat, car and home repairs. I could go on. Even things at the dollar store cost $1.25. And yes, a six-pack of Charmin at Kroger, $10. Are we in a recession? Yes. With 2 consecutive quarters of negative gross domestic product, the United States entered a recession in the summer of 2022. What do you think the chances are that recession effects worsen after this election? Inflation is decimating our elderly. 37% of elderly males and 42% of elderly females relied on Social Security for 50% or more of their income last year. USA Today recently reported the percentage of seniors in poverty jumped to 10.3%, almost 6 million Americans, the highest level since 2002. And Social Security is pretty paltry, even with the good news of a sizable increase this year. That money is earmarked, as the school likes to put it, already. Now to add to the burden of inflation, to add to the prospect of a nationwide and also global recession, to add insult to injury, you, the Board of LCSD, is asking all of us, the residents and taxpayers, for a 13% increase in school property taxes when we can afford it the least. So I ask the people of Loveland, will you vote to protect your neighbors who can least afford this increase? Because your vote will affect all of us. Will you join me and so many others and vote no on this levy in order to slow down the unsustainable upward trajectory of school spending? Will you join us in voting no in order to protect our senior citizens and the financially insecure in our community? vote on Tuesday, November 8th. We're asking you to vote no on this levy, and we are depending on you. Thank you all very much for your time.
Nice job.
I practiced.
Good start.
Thank you.
David Shoemaker.
Good evening. I first want to congratulate the students of Loveland City Schools for the impressive showing on the 2022 Ohio Report Card. 5 stars in 5 categories. However, 5 stars in 5 categories doesn't necessarily mean that Loveland City Schools is #1 in the state. Any more than straight A's on a report card means #1 in the class. You have to compare district scores for that determination. Performance Index. One of the 5 state report card categories is called Performance Index. This category scores a school district's achievement on state tests. Report card actually provides state rankings for this category in 2022. Loveland ranked 59th out of all the districts with a score of 99.4 points. And of course, the 5-star rating. What's puzzling is the 2019 Ohio Report Card gave Loveland a B, 4 stars, you might say, rating for a higher score of 101.1. Digging deeper, I discovered that the state lowered the Performance Index rating scale for 2022 by about 12 points, giving Loveland and other schools 5 stars instead of what they would have gotten as 4 stars. Without the 12-point reduction, only 2 districts in the state would have had scores high enough to get 5 stars. And Loveland is not one of them. For the remaining 4 categories, instead of reviewing scores for all state districts, I decided to narrow my scope to compare Loveland scores to 7 local school districts: Madeira, Marymount, Indian Hill, Wyoming, Mason, Forest Hills, and Sycamore. I compared all 5 categories, and Loveland City Schools scored 6th out of the 8 school districts, scoring higher than Forest Hills and Mason. Loveland is not #1 in the state. Loveland is not #1 locally. Loveland is probably in the top 10 or 15% of all districts in the state for providing a quality education. Loveland teaching staff. On the other hand, the Loveland teaching staff boasts some of the highest master's degree percentages in the state. 86.9%, which was 8th in the state in 2022, and 90.2%, which is 3rd in the state in 2021. I believe they were 9th in 2020. Loveland teachers with master's degrees are in the top 0.5% to 1.3% of all districts. Master's degrees are expensive. I'll end it there. Why not? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lynn Mangan.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Mangan. My husband, 83-year-old mom, residents of Loveland for 26 years. 3 of our sons have graduated from Loveland, and our youngest is currently a junior. I am a very proud and grateful citizen of the United States of America, a country that recognizes the value of education for all of the children, and a country where every vote counts. Yet with that gratitude comes a challenge for every local community. How do we provide quality and cost-effective education? And when looking at big problems like this, I ask, how are we balancing the needs of our customers, our shareholders, and employees? Digging into the key performance indicators, both locally, nationally, and globally. And so I ask the same question for Loveland schools. How can we provide quality, cost-effective education for our students, community, and employees? So let's talk about our students. The district has both the privilege and the challenge of supporting all students And our growth index, which is a measure of each student's year-over-year learning growth, is third highest of the 39 districts in Hamilton, Warren, and Claremont County. This demonstrates our district is focused on all of our students. And along with the academic growth, our teachers teach our kids to be self-aware, critical thinkers, and thriving members of our community. I think we can all remember teachers that have made an impact on our lives. Loveland is no different. Next up are district employees. Every single employee heard the community in 2020 when the answer was we need to do more or less. All employees took a 0% inflationary increase this year and our teachers for 2 years. This will save the district and our community millions of dollars. 48 positions were cut, reducing staff by 9%. And there is a great deal of valuable information available to community members who would like to take a deeper dive look at it. Our district staff is doing more with less. And finally, our community does support one another. Our parents have increased fees for extracurricular activities and tuition for all-day kindergarten. Loveland's expenses to provide our education are well below all other Hamilton County districts, 9% less per student, and significantly under national averages on cost per student. The district is providing a quality education with low expenditures per student. So why now? Our schools do not receive an increase when inflation increased. Our student-teacher ratio is third highest of any district in Hamilton County. Without a levy, more staff will be cut, current programs will be reduced, and class sizes will increase. Is Loveland perfect? No. Is there room for improvement? Always yes, in Loveland and everywhere else. After 8 years of no property taxes, the time is now. No property tax increases, the time is now. There is no better investment than a strong foundation for the children of our community. So please vote yes with eyes wide open. I would appreciate everybody's support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last, we have Alan Garten.
Thank you. I didn't really come. My name is Alan Garten. I live at 54 Bears Run Drive. And I was made aware about a day ago by Linda Holtkamp that you were having this meeting here. And actually, I didn't come prepared to speak, but I do have some things to say. I'll try to keep them short. And that is, my wife and I are retired. We're in our 15th year living in Loveland. We thought when we moved in, we found a really nice house that we liked and it looked like a community that was growing well. But what's happened, it seems like, is the cost of education, particularly our property taxes, reevaluation of our property, and things like that keep going up and up and up. And we're typical retirees. I know there's a lot of retirees that live in the that are working on fixed incomes, and money gets tight after a while. And I'd really like to know if as much effort was put forth by the board to look at how to save, how to streamline, how to make more efficient the school system, and especially when it comes to administration, the number of administrators. Administrators are not teaching the children. And a lot of times you see these big staffs and things like that has been put forth in the past. I know particularly the levy where the ground acquisition was on the ballot to sell concepts to the taxpayers. It looks like a lot of money was spent at that time doing that, not much money spent trying to decide how to save the money. So as far as the cost goes of retirees and a lot of the citizens who live here, I would say please consider voting no or not passing through and wait until a more operable time to do this and one that you can prove better sustainability of the income. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have.
Do we still have more time for the public comment section?
We still have more time for public to comment.
Would you,
Is that what
is
you're
it
asking?
okay to offer to finish a statement that went over the allotted time?
David's,
Yes.
do you have more that you'd like to present? There are limits.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All I wanted to say, because I had shown this to my wife and she says, well, it sounds like Loveland's great. And we are. And, but it's a question of balance. And what I was trying to point out, I don't know if it became across clear, but top 10% or 15% in all the districts of the state is tremendous. But top 0.5% to 1.3% for teachers' master's degrees is a little over the top because that's more money. And I didn't say it, but I'll give you this other little fact I found, and you probably know it, maybe some of you do, is that for the past 3 years, Loveland, I got to say this right, Loveland has a higher percent of teachers with master's degrees with 14 years and lower experience than any other school in the state. You're number one with number of percentage of teachers with master's degrees with all the schools that are 14 years and younger as far as teaching years experience. Does that make sense?
kids is at the exact midpoint of those 600 schools, the exact midpoint. There are school districts that spend some more, and there are some districts that spend some less. But it's a heck of a database. It's a heck of a set of reference points. And it's not just total spending. There's a whole bunch of statistics that are there. And I've looked at some of this data going back 10 years to understand the so-called sustainability of this model. It's not a comfortable model in any sense of the word, but sustainability is another question. In any event, every metric that I look at, from class size, numbers of administrators, shockingly, even teacher salaries, are factored into bottom line spending at the state education site that I've been talking to. It's the so-called CUPP report. You can Google it and get access to it. You can pick at any individual statistic you want in there. But in the end, the bottom line takes them all into account, all of them into account. And we still end up just spending in the middle of a very large pack. It's undeniable. That is a fact. On the other hand, we have enviable results when it comes to educational performance. The absolute top tier of Ohio schools. In the business world, there would be a story of extraordinary results at ordinary costs. I gotta tell you, that kind of thing is really tough to make happen, but it's magic when it does. That's so hard to do, but when it happens, it's really something special. On the flip side, what we do have is a tax issue. You learn early on in business that value is determined by what someone is actually willing to pay. Property values are statistics that measures people's actions, their decisions to push home prices up or down based on their view of value. There's little doubt that our top performing schools help make Loveland the highly desirable place to live that it is, and that helps to drive up property values. At the same time, we're one of the lowest commercialized communities in the state. You may not be aware of it, but according to this data, we're also blessed with one of the highest absolute average incomes in the state. Very, very top tier. Those three facts make for what I call a perfect storm for high residential taxes. Our high property values and average incomes drive state funding down to one of the lowest levels of all those districts in Ohio. So in funding the schools, you've got multiple sources, property taxes being the primary one, state funding being second, and some federal money kind of rounding it out as third. Federal money doesn't change all that much, that's built on your particular situation, but state funding works on a formula. And we are significantly disadvantaged because we have high property values and high average incomes. That works against us in the state funding formula. So with that low state funding, property taxes are all that's left to fund most of what I call the truly average bill for our schools. And with relatively little business to absorb that property tax bill, residents are left to pay the vast majority of it directly. So it's not what the schools cost. The schools cost what on average all the schools cost. But what we pay is higher because of these other factors. So what do you do about it? At this point in Loveland's growth, building a much larger business base to absorb some of this burden isn't easy. And we'd all have to decide if we would really want that fundamental change to the character of Loveland. Do we want Loveland to look like Loveland looks today? Or do we want it to look like Blue Ash or Mason and some of the other communities that have higher levels of commercialization? It's a question. And if we wanted that, understanding the real estate situation in town complicates things, and the fact that we live in 3 different counties and the zoning elements of that complicates things. There are those that argue we should move to an earnings tax / income tax versus property tax to fund the schools. Those are a couple of the very few legally available options, but as they just shift the tax burden from one set of taxpayers to another, there's no guarantee such a move would be any less controversial at the ballot box. Those moves don't change what the community pays, just who amongst us pay it. Some argue we should have a fixed term levy versus a continuing, or as they call it, a permanent levy. Let me give you some simple math. The schools cost, rough numbers now, let's say 50 million a year in normal operating expenses. Those are the teacher salaries, the light bill, and all those things that are kind of day to day. Roughly 50 million a year. Factoring in traditional inflationary increases similar to what most businesses see could easily add 2 to 3.5% per year. That's to say, from a business perspective, we wouldn't be shocked at 2 or 3% of growth in expenses. We work really hard in the business world to keep it down that low. Not everybody gets it down that low. That means that you have about a $1 to $2 million increase annually in the base costs of running the schools. Doing nothing different, just doing the same stuff, it would naturally cost us $1 million or $2 million more per year. In Loveland, as it happens to turn out, we always talk about mills on property tax levies, right? A mill in Loveland equates to about $1 million in revenue. That's why 4.9 mills equates to 4.9 million in incremental revenue to the schools. So that means under very normal circumstances, the schools effectively burn through, we always used to use a term called cash burn rates in the business world. The schools effectively burn through 1 to 2 mills of a given levy in any given year. So if you approve, to make the math a little easier, a 4.5 mil levy, I know we're talking 4.9, but just to make the math easier, you'd burn through at $1.5 million per year. 3 years, you'd burn through that levy. My point is, therefore, at a modest levy ask of 4.9 mils, you'd be back asking the community for a levy decision in a few years, regardless of whether it is a fixed term or continuing term levy. There is an accountability here. It ends up making little difference in the real world. The fact that property taxes, once voted in, and I know people continue, in some quarters to think that a reassessment in our property values equates to an increased property tax. In Ohio, it does not. We just see higher property values indicated on our tax bills. And if you look for usually a thing called a reduction factor by state law, that growth in property values is negated and no additional revenue is charged to the homeowner or comes to the school district. And that's one of the reasons, it's the primary reason, that this levy issue comes up from time to time and causes all the heartache that it does. So I would argue that's a built-in guarantee of accountability to the public, which is really what the law intended it to be. So no one likes taxes, and I don't like taxes. But I do love living here. I do. And I do have a personal sense of responsibility to do what I can to give the kids in this community the best shot we can at a great start to their lives. Lots of other homeowners here helped to pay for the cost of educating our daughter years ago when she was in the Loveland schools, and I'm grateful to them. But that's part of the Loveland story. Doing our part for the youngsters in this town going forward, whether they're our kids or not. That's what Loveland does. Loveland is a great place to live with a long list of positives, including a great school system. But in the end, it's hard to avoid the fact, I'm a business guy, this is what it is to me. It's hard to avoid the fact that we do have to pay for it all. There is no magic someone else to pay it. And driving its costs continually down, and there's a question raised earlier
about what has the district done. Well, you know, there's something like 47 people less here today than 2 years ago. That's one of the things that the district has done. And I'll show you some charts later on that demonstrate how we spend federal ESSER money to push this out as far as possible. There's been a tremendous amount of work done, and that's what I came here to do, to work on driving the economic sustainability of this district better into the future. But at the end of the day, you can drive costs down, but you have to realize that driving costs continually down has its own set of repercussions. And whether households value, coming back front and center on this, whether households value what we get for what we pay is really the central question at the ballot box. That's what the board did a couple of months ago. It put it to the voters. The board can stop a levy. It can't approve one. It can approve asking the community whether the community supports a levy or not. And that's what the board did. And I think that was the right thing to do. So that's all I have on that subject for the time being.
Other board members? Reverend Isle.
Thank you. Kevin's the businessman, as he said. I'm the pastor. So I do think the economic case for this proposed tax levy is a strong one. The first in 8 years, limited in scope to minimize the financial impact on the community, stabilizing our ability to offer one of the best educations in our state at a very reasonable cost when compared to other districts. We spend a lot of time talking about these aspects of levy, as we should, but as we approach Election Day, I also think it's important to be reminded the broader issue of why a strong school district matters in all of our communities around this country. And Kevin started to speak to that as well. When I was running for office last year, as I reflected upon why I was running and why I thought that the work of the board was so important, I kept returning to the idea of the public trust represented by our commitment to providing a quality education for every child in America. It's foundational to the opportunities that we aspire to make possible for every child in our country, and it is foundational to a free and healthy society. I was playing out with my granddaughter in the front yard the other day with some leaves, and she was carefree, jumping in a pile of leaves. I found myself sighing as I looked at the levy sign in my yard. We have something special here in the Loveland School District, but its excellence could be compromised if we do not pass this levy in November. And so I want to urge every voter to consider not only the financial impact of this levy, but also our commitment to the sacred trust of providing a quality education to all of our children. My granddaughter's coming into a world that's increasingly fast-paced and complex. She needs an education system that's ready to meet these challenges and a community that's willing to make sacrifices so that the most vulnerable members of our community, our children, have the opportunities that they need and they deserve. I believe that this levy should pass on its own merits because it's what this district has been able, because of what this district has been able to accomplish and how it's engaged this community. But in addition, I hope that every voter considers their responsibility as citizens to steward the educational opportunities of our next generation.
Thank you. Anything else from the board at this time? Mr. Ames, I see you moving cameras around. Are we on a different system again?
I'm just backing up the backup.
Oh, okay. We have backups to the backups. Very good. I just was curious what was going on. All right. If that's all from the board at this time, then we'll move to student representative to the board reports. Mr. Ames, how, since you're the recorder, would you like them to stay at their seats and give their report?
Perfect, right there.
Good. I think Michaela's going to go first. Is that right?
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. So tonight I'll be giving the PK through 4th grade reports, and then Austin will be giving 5th through high school. So to start off, a little bit on the academic side, the administration of MAP Growth, KRA, Ames Web Plus / MAP Reading Fluency, and other beginning of the year assessments have been completed through PK through 4th grade. So staff continues to complete public school work safety modules. Students and staff participate in safety drills on a regular basis. Mr. Fancher and Mrs. Horn are participating in the HCESC MAP and ELA councils. In addition, they are both participating in the principal roundtables with BCESC. All right, and then a huge thanks to Mrs. Mary Tobias for putting on an awesome book fair for the LES and LPS students. And LPS has worked diligently to strengthen our positive behavior intervention support systems from last year and is fully implementing the updated plan this year. So going along with that, moving to the LECC building, the LECC building leadership team is working with classroom teachers each week to have a focused common area to review practice and our shared expectations. So kind of to celebrate the students doing a good job with that, LECC will celebrate our next group of kindergarten Tiger Cubs at the end of October. So this means the students are selected by teachers based on demonstrations of care, respect, and responsibility. Likewise, LPS and LES are preparing to celebrate more terrific Tigers during the month of October, which is a similar system just like the students. LES teacher Melissa Pranger is working with Brady Burns, LHS student, to organize and collect new books from LECC Tiger Cubs to donate to the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Center. LPS and LES raised money during the recent book fairs to donate books to Cincinnati Children's Hospital and to provide books for our scholarship program for students in need. A total of $2,275 was raised. So I want to thank everybody, their Tigers and their families, for their amazing generosity. LES has begun their compassion project called Socktober. Students will be collecting socks throughout the month of October, and they will, at the end, be donated to local shelters. The LUPTA, PK through 4th, annual Dance-a-thon was another huge success. The current amount is closing in on $50,000, which will go to supporting building projects, field trips, student events, and just overall enriching experiences of all our PK through 4th Tigers. Lastly, some upcoming events. So October 26th is the start of the B. Loveland Showcase event at LHS, and then our November 17th and November 18th, LPS will recognize their terrific Tigers.
Great report, and just in case there was anything you didn't hear or you didn't take notes on, some of those items are included in the administrative reports that are on board docs, so you can refer back if there was a date that you wanted to verify. You didn't need to be taking shorthand, but it was a great report. Thank you. Austin, go ahead.
I'm going to start with the LIS and LMS and then go on to high school. To start off, the students and staff participated in Homecoming Spirit Week 2 weeks ago, is that right? To celebrate all things Loveland Tigers, students and staff dressed up for Spirit Days each day, attended the parade on Thursday, and cheered on the varsity football team to their 4th win in a row on Friday. Following in the footsteps of LHS, LMS will be implementing the Aubrey Mental Health Check-In tool starting in November, which will help students both academically and mentally. LIS is starting a new program called the Tiger Brain Trust. The trust is composed of a diverse group of students under the leadership of Mr. Waple and Mrs. Carter, with the goal of improving the student experience for all. With students out of the building on October 14th and the 17th, LMS teachers were able to spend time focusing on gifted training, career exploration, planning for the second quarter, and other sorts of professional development. LIS teachers participated in a session about sketchnoting, suicide prevention, content team meetings, along with CPR and crisis prevention intervention trainings. Supporting the positive behavior and intervention supports process, LMS and LIS will again recognize students and staff on a monthly basis. Congratulations to all students who received a positive office referral this month, and congratulations to all staff who received the staff shout out. I didn't include the names, but they are all the winners are attached on board docs. On the 28th of October, LMS will be having their career day, and LIS 6th grade will be doing their annual long walk to water, where they walk with the jugs of water through Claiborne. Now for the high school, homecoming week put on by student council was a great success. I wanted to personally shout out junior Marissa Armstrong, who planned all of the spirit days, homecoming activities, and the dance. Also, I wanted to congratulate Allie Jinder for running the cutest dog contest and raising over $550 for the SPCA. Finally, congratulations to Matt McCarthy and Joshua Bryant, who were crowned this year's Royal Tigers. Student Council also helped restart the tradition of senior parking spot painting. So thank you, Mr. Broadwater, for giving us permission. And thank you, Mr. Reed and Miss Katie Burkett for spending half their weekend sitting out in the freezing cold, helping students paint their parking spots. Thank you to Mr. Drews Mitchell and the entire counseling team for a successful Exploration Wednesday last week. Freshmen took part in class bonding activities. Sophomores and juniors took one of 4 career or college readiness assessments, and seniors were off-site either volunteering, job shadowing, or visiting a university. Thank you to LHS's Hope Squad, who planned events and raised awareness during National Suicide Prevention Week. Fall athletic teams are heading into the tournament, so make sure to come out to the stadium or the gym to support volleyball, and so we can try to get more wins. Selfishly, I'd like to invite everyone to watch our soccer game on Thursday night at 7. We play Kings. It's going to be a tough game. We could use your support. Finally, be sure to come out to the Tiger Stadium this Friday to support football's last in-season game against the West Claremont Wolves. It's also senior night, so be sure to come out and support our seniors before their last couple of games. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great report. So thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Hey, Austin, where is your soccer game?
It is at the Loveland Stadium.
I'll be there Thursday. She goes on. All right. Well, just to let you know, when you need to leave, you are able to leave. We'll be moving next to superintendent updates, and that's a report from all of the buildings and their progress and their achievement. So you may stay for that if you'd like, but if you need to go get some work done or go finish soccer practice, I think maybe you left early, right? So I think they're probably done soccer practicing, but anyway, just let you know that you are able to leave if you would like.
I will not be offended if I present and you're not here with the superintendent. I know you guys are very busy.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is superintendent's updates, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Broadwater, who I think is going to turn it over to Dr. Orso.
Yes, I've got a quick few slides, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Orso. First of all, I want to apologize to the board and to the community for the video issue that we're having. It's not acceptable. I know Mr. Samuels, Mr. Ames had the company that provided it to us out today to look at it. It's not okay, and we'll get it figured out, but I apologize because I know this is something that's very important to make sure that we get it out to the community. Luckily, we do have a backup and a backup of the backup, and so we got that, but I do apologize.
Mike, just a
Sure.
thing here, I'm noticing that the presentation is making it out.
Oh, it is?
The presentation is,
Okay.
but I guess the video is not.
Huh.
So.
Should I try the mic then, or?
Try the mic and see. The video is not making it from our system too.
We don't-
so that's
we
probably
don't have any mic
Not
Makes
no
sense
power on the
to
mic.
see, yeah.
No audio, no video, but the presentation is out there.
Okay,
So.
all right. All right, well, I'll just take a quick few minutes. First of all, the first slide I've got up there, the report card, again, just I know we've talked about it a lot, but I do want to say thank you to our staff and all of our staff when it comes to teachers, our paraprofessionals, instructional aides, bus driver, everybody, administrators. When you're one of 12 out of 607, whatever the measure is, if it's a good measure, you should be proud of it. And so we are very proud of that because it means we're doing things pretty well and we're working pretty hard for kids. The reminder I've got up there, the next slide, is we do have the B. Loveland Showcase Night. That is October 26th, next week, 6:30. I'm going to take a little bit of time. We invite anybody to come in if you'd like to listen. We're going to present a little bit about the report card, our academics, as well as a little bit of information when it comes to the levy. In terms of levy informational sessions, we heard from the community they would like to have informal small ones. We've done about 20 to 24 of those. We were at one last night in the backyard, the beautiful backyard, and it was a beautiful fall evening, and a lot of good questions. And so we also have done a Facebook Live. We've got a podcast out there, and then the showcase night, we were asked to do a large presentation by some of the community members. So that is it. We also had a large one at the Oasis the other evening as well. So we really are making an attempt to get out there and provide the information that people need and allow them to ask questions. Next slide that I have out there, just real quick. This is a postcard that went out to the mail, so I just wanted to let the board know in terms of information where we've got Loveland's #1, that's the report card information. We also had our elementary, intermediate, middle, and high schools named best schools by U.S. News and World Report, received an A rating in the niche rankings, and placed us in the top 10% of all Ohio districts, approximately 607 districts. So again, I believe we have, I hate to call it a product, but I think we have a great product there. The business that we are here to do, we do a very good job of when it comes to educating kids and providing them challenges as well as opportunities. So just so the board is aware, that came out on one part of the postcard. The next slide that we have up there, just to give you a highlight, the couple pieces of information that when I'm out talking to groups that seem to resonate and maybe was not information people were aware of, is on the bottom left there, the 607 school districts in Ohio. Loveland, is in the bottom 7% for the lowest revenue per pupil. So the amount of money that we receive, local and state, the amount of money we receive per student, we are 561st out of 607 in terms of revenue. So when you look at that, in my mind, that means you've got 93% of the other districts having more money per pupil. And to me, that means the money is being managed pretty well when you look at the results that we had. The expenditures, Mr. Doherty talked about, of the same study, the expenditures, we are 304th out of 607, which puts us right smack dab in the middle. And what that means is, of the revenue that we receive, we earmark more for the classroom than some of the other districts that are above us in revenue, if that makes sense. So we're pretty proud of that. That means we're really working very, very hard to give the community, our shareholders, the product that they want for a very good price. The other item on there that seems to jump out at people, and we heard it earlier, administrative costs. We are the second lowest administrative costs in Hamilton County, and I think that's important. Sometimes we forget that we do need administrators to make sure kids are safe, and if you want a perfect on the report card, you've got to have some administration of how things are working in the buildings. And so with that, I'll bump to, I think we've got one more. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Orso. The one that jumps out, on the right, you've got the numbers there, which everybody has seen if they've been looking for it. But how will the funds be used? I think it's important, again, to remind people, we really want to continue the excellence that we're doing and maintain the current educational programs, restore the high school busing that was cut. When it's asked, what has the district done in regards to cutting expenditures, that is one that has hurt some families. So restore the busing when possible, when we can find enough drivers to do that. We would like to be able to provide that for our high school students. And then the additional 5 full-time employees, teachers, certified full-time employees, if the enrollment goes up. If not, we don't necessarily want to use those, but if we need them, they would provide us a little bit of flexibility. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Orso and let her share the good news of what we do every day, which is academics. So Dr. Orso.
Thank you. All right, you can go on to the next slide. All right, so This is the final of a three-part series on the report card presentation. Back in August, you heard me talk about the district as a whole and how we performed as a whole. And then last month, you heard from our principals at LECC and LES and talked about their building specifically. And tonight, as you can see, we have the principals from the other 4 buildings here to talk about how each of their buildings performed on the report card and highlight some of the great things that are going on. So you've heard from me plenty, so I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our first principal, Mr. Fancher, and he is going to talk a little bit about LPS and his building report card and some of the great things going on there.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Kevin Fancher. I'm the principal at the first and second grade building at Loveland Primary School. And on behalf of our entire staff, I just want to thank the board for your support of our building and the things that we do every day and the opportunity to talk with you this evening. So thank you. The report card for the lower grades, I wish I would have been with my colleagues in September, but I had to make the commitment of my daughter's high school soccer game. So I asked Dr. Orso if I could do October, and she said sure. So here I am tonight with the upper grades. A lot of the measures that the state reports on for Loveland Primary School are non-reportable. And the 2 that are reportable, the 1 early literacy component rating of 2 stars is one that I'd like to talk to the board about this evening because it is one of the trickiest measures. It's a little finicky for us, and there's reasons behind that. So if you don't mind advancing the slide, we'll go into that first one, which is the gap closing measure. That measure is based on really 2 items, and it's gifted services and gifted identification. We do the identification pretty well. We do not have gifted services, though, as the board probably already understands that those services officially begin in the upper grades. The identification for our gifted students doesn't happen until the spring of second grade. So it's right before we hand them off to Mrs. Ford at the elementary school. And we do pretty good with that population of identification and serving those needs in the classroom. If you guys don't mind, who's Adam, is that you? Okay. So the gap closing measures, you can see there's very few items that we get credit for. I talked to Dr. Orso today, and I was trying to better understand that the gifted identification services, and it's an all or nothing. So the 0 or 5, I was wondering how we didn't get any points in that measure. You either meet that or you don't, so you can't get a 3, 4, or even a 2. So, and what we ended up with was 5 points out of that, but we ended up with the 4-star rating. So it's just one of those measures that we just don't have a lot of ability to report that to the state at the age level that I work with. Our early literacy measure, which Mrs. Foran probably spoke about, and I think Mrs. Garion talked a little bit about, but LECC is non-reportable. One of the main differences for Loveland Primary School and Loveland Elementary School is the way that the state reports this measure. So for the elementary grades, you have a 3-part to that score. For Loveland Primary School, we have a 1-part. And I spoke about this before, but what you have are students who test in the fall before September 30th of the school year. And then you retest the following fall before September 30th. So what we're really talking about for this measure, talking to the state, is our first grade students that are then tested in second grade. Second grade students don't really count for Loveland Primary School because they changed the building IRN and they go to the elementary school, and therefore it doesn't count for Loveland Primary School, it counts for the District 5-star. So all of our measure, 100%, is on moving students from what we call a non-on-track status to an on-track status. And we have 9 months to do it plus 3 months of summer. And so instead of the elementary school where they have a little bit more of a balance with the OST, the state test that they do in 3rd grade plus the promotion to 4th grade, LPS doesn't have any of those measures. It's just not on track to on track for our most challenging students. So I added a couple slides coming next after this one. What you will notice on this slide is from our most challenging students that were reported as not on track, we actually did pretty well. We had 2/3 of those students move to on-track status in 9 months' time with that summer slide of 3 months that they have off before we get to report the measure again. When you drill down into that data, and this is the data that really is telling. So this is a subgroup. This is our reading intervention students beginning of the year data, I pulled some pre-pandemic numbers and our current numbers. So on the left, you see the pre-pandemic. The biggest tell there is what we were able to touch when it comes to students who are in reading intervention. If you look at those numbers, those instructional reading levels, we were able to go much deeper in the pre-pandemic population than we are today. It's getting better, you'll see that on the next couple of slides, but in the 2021-2022 school year and in the 2020-2021 school year, what you'll notice is roughly the same number of students being picked up in intervention, but their instructional reading level is much lower. So our highest student in reading intervention for both of those school years was what we call a level 12, which is roughly third quarter approaching end of the first grade school year. So that as they come into second grade, they're still not at the benchmark they should be. And that's why you have yellow, orange, and red there. Green would be the established readers. So pre-pandemic numbers, we had students that we call bubble students that we were able to touch and pull into reading intervention. They were just at the bubble, which means they were just at the benchmark. That has evaporated. And so we've gotten really a larger gap with those incoming students that we're trying to close. And at the same time, 100% of LPS measure on the K-3 literacy measure is reflective on that number. So as you dig deeper and you go to the next slide, this is just a kind of an overview of what you would see with our incoming students in the fall. So first grade, pre-pandemic, the average there. So underneath you see the parentheses that says pre-pandemic average 15, 13, 72. 15% of our students were what we call tier 3, the most intensive reading intervention supports were needed for 15% of our kids. 13% were right in the middle, just slightly below, what we call that tier 2. And 72% of our incoming first graders were at benchmark. The main thing that I would like to point out is honestly that red group. So when you look at last year and even this year, our tier 3 students, the gap between students who are intensive versus students who are coming in at benchmark is tremendously different than what pre-pandemic numbers look like. So we have at the bottom of those two bar graphs, you see 26, 15, and 59. 26% of our students in first grade for the last 2 years, 25, 26% have been in tier 3, most intensive. Only 59% of our students were coming into us at benchmark. Now the good news is on the next slide, because we're actually chipping away at this, and the problem is we can't do it fast enough to remove that 2-star. But the reason why we have a 5-star as a district is because we are chipping away at this, and by the time they get to the state tested grades in the elementary school and for the district report card, it shows up in the data. So when you look at second grade, pre-pandemic numbers on the left, again, you had 73% of our students that were at benchmark, you had roughly 17% of our kids that were in tier 3. If you look at the far right there, that's this school year. That's the closest we've been to pre-pandemic numbers to date. So we now have this school year, 67% of our kids at benchmark and 21% of our students in that tier 3, which is really a lot closer than what it's been for the last 3 years. So that, what I want to show tonight is just that progress is being made, but it's being made over time, and it's very challenging for our tier 3 students to make that from September to the next September. And so I dug a little bit deeper. Kevin, you talked about some other schools that we compare ourselves to, and I think some other guests here this evening talked about other districts. The schools that struggle the most with the K-3 literacy measure are primary schools. If you are an early childhood center or you are a K2 or 1-2 building, you're going to struggle with this measure. MECC, which is Mason's Early Childhood Center, same difference. They're like 1-star, 2 stars. Looked at every single Lakota school that's a 1 or 2 building, you'll find 1, 2 stars. If you go to Indian Hill, you'll find a non-report because their subgroup is too small. If you find 5-star schools, you can find those in Forest Hills, but they are neighborhood K6. And so if you took our data from LPS and put that with LES data, we'd be a 5-star elementary school too. We're just not, because it's too difficult to actually show that when you have 100% of your measure moving students from non-on track to on track. And honestly, when you look at the other schools, that are moving their students from non-on-track to on-track, Loveland Primary School is actually knocking out of the park at 67%. Most schools are around 44%. So very proud of the work that Loveland Primary School staff is doing, working really, really hard, and we are seeing that rebound happening. But I want to thank the board honestly for the support that Mr. Broadwater brought to us probably in the spring of last year when we were talking about adding on additional reading support. The reason was that circle graph that you saw, the pie graph, where you really start talking about what students were able to get our hands on, and early intervention makes the whole thing work. And so by the time you get to the elementary school, we want to fix those reading difficulties and make sure our students are as strong as they can be. And so with that extra 1.5 that we added on for reading support, is allowing us to do that. I don't believe there's any additional slides, but I don't need to check. I don't remember if I did. Oh, I did one more. Ames Web. Ames Web is kind of like the blood pressure and temperature of reading health. And so what you see again in direct comparison is that first grade and second grade on the right is our current school year. The amount of students in the red, the most intensive, first grade is where that beginning is, and you can see over time it's getting stronger and stronger, and we're getting that red group to be more narrow. When you look at the pre-pandemic numbers on the left, again, pretty significant difference in DRA, but it's getting better when we look at our Ames Web measure, especially when we compare it to second grade. So you see the 14, 16, 70 under second grade on the right. That is very similar to what our Ames Web measure would have been pre-pandemic. And we just took an average of the last 3 years that we gave that prior to doing map reading fluency. So 11, 17, 72, that's pretty similar results that we were getting pre-pandemic to now. Are there any other questions for?
Just the 1.5 was the reading specialist, so we were able to, I'm sure the board remembers, we used ESSER funds just for the COVID gap and its appropriate use.
Yes.
Sounds like it's been useful for our kids.
Well, and what we're able to do with that is pick up the students who are still not at benchmark, but they're really close. And so what I told Mrs. Foreign last year was coming in, our second graders weren't quite where we wanted them to be before we handed them off. And that full-time equivalent person that was added on, her caseload is all third grade. So we were able to pick up the students we need to pick up in first and second grade with the 0.5 and the current reading teachers we have. The extra one-time equivalent, full-time equivalent that we have is serving third grade. So those students would not have been at benchmark and would have been underserved absent that position.
Your presentation is a great testament to the value of metrics. I always tell people numbers are your friends, even when they're telling you what you don't want to hear. There's stuff in here you don't like to see, but the fact is you're looking at it and you're able to track whether you're getting better against that. And as I read it, in all these cases, you are getting better at this, and the granularity of it actually helps you to focus on the areas that are in the greatest need, if I understand this correctly.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Daisy asked me if I needed an introduction. I'm like, no, I can handle that. I am Julie Carter. I am the principal of Loveland Intermediate, going into my second year, and it is my honor to share with you our report card. I think one thing to mention going into this school year on a positive note is that things are kind of starting to feel back like school in regards to really focusing on just doing amazing things for kids. Our staff is getting clubs and after school opportunities up and running, and just really trying to be creative with how we use our resources and really not have to worry about some of the things we've had to worry about the past year. So it is a good start to a school year, and it's been very exciting, and every day is really a great day with lots of different things going on. So, yeah, you got me. Okay, so for us, we are rated on 3 different components. Those are the achievement and the progress and the gap closing. So 5 stars in achievement, 3 in progress, and 5 in gap closing, and we'll kind of dive deeper into each one of those through the presentation. So the first one is achievement. So when you look at achievement, you are basically looking at how each student scores this specific year. So each of those different levels comes with basically a value connected to it, and you're adding up all those values to look at how high are your students performing. So this is a huge shout out to the staff and students at LIS, but also it's a shout out to really all the hard work that's being done at LECC, LPS, LES, because we're getting kids that are coming up to us and they're reading well, they're doing that. They have a lot of skills that they're coming up to us with. A lot of students are identified gifted, and we're trying to continually challenge them. So I think it's a good measure of how a lot of people's hard work along the way is really paying off with our students. So our achievement is at 5 stars, which is certainly not easy to reach. And we really have been trying to kind of celebrate that success, because too oftentimes in education we're so busy doing things we forget to celebrate. So we've been trying to celebrate a little bit at LIS. So this next one kind of shows you the different where students are performing in each one of those levels. So when you look at, when you kind of add those up, you can see that over 60% of our students are scoring in the advanced and accomplished range, which is very high. So that is good. And if you just look at the very top of that slide, that is, you're looking at the points that for performance index that we scored, and then that percentage of 91.6 puts us in the 5-star range. There's all kinds of percentages or all kinds of numbers. They make it almost as challenging as possible. All right, so under progress, I would be lying if I didn't say I was a little disappointed with 3 stars in progress. So progress basically means that they're comparing student scores from the year before and how much did they grow based upon like projections. So our students are growing a year's growth, which is a great thing. Of course, I would like it to be more than that. So I do want to just highlight some things that we have done in the past and we are continuing to do to make sure that we're challenging all learners at LIS. And that is, we have Tiger Time at the beginning of the day where we're providing a lot of intervention to students, math intervention, reading intervention. We are also doing things like counseling groups, meeting the social emotional needs of students. We have a Starfish program where we have students who are mentored by different staff members. We just got done with our first round of data meetings, which is having conversations with teachers about how their students are doing in the classroom and what are specific things that we can do to help them throughout the way. So lots of great things. Also, we just got done with some professional development days, and it's been neat to see our teachers collaborate, but also get some professional development to kind of keep their wheels going and giving them some new ideas and strategies to implement in the classroom. The next one is gap closing. So gap closing is looking at subgroup data. So at LIS, and you'll see it differently amongst different buildings, how many subgroups you have based on the number of students that fall into those subgroups. So in my building, we have 7 subgroups. We ended up with 5 stars, which is awesome, in gap closing. And on the next slide, you'll be able to see where and in what categories we receive points. So we received the max points in most areas. One thing I wanted to highlight is that gifted performance index, because that has always been a challenging one to get. So that is pretty impressive, because sometimes some of us, our highest flyers are the ones that are really hard to keep showing that level of growth. So that is awesome. 2 areas that I kind of am going to be focused on are those growth areas in ELA and in math. So we had potential to earn, sorry, you worried me, 6 points in those 2 areas. And so in those areas, you have to get +2. And we had shown growth in some of those areas, just not all the way to +2 to be able to get a point. So if I were to say in gap closing, one of the areas that I really want to focus on and continue to focus on with decision making and kind of allocating resources and things is showing that growth with all students, especially those students in our subgroups. So if anybody that knows me really, really well knows that I'm really passionate about at-risk students. And that's something that we are always trying to think of ways to engage those families and engage the students and trying to find ways to mentor them, trying to find ways to intervene with them, all those different things. So trust me when I tell you that a lot of my work will be trying to look at those subgroups such as economically disadvantaged, special education, those types of things, to look at how are those students growing. They are growing. I have data to support they're growing, but not to the +2 of which I would get a point for. But overall, 5 stars in gap closing is another thing to be super proud of. My last part is just, I feel just really thankful to be in a district as amazing as Loveland. I think it is a gem, and I think that our students and our staff are extremely dedicated to our students. I get the privilege of seeing it every day, and I just want to thank you guys for your support, for doing what you do to support the work that we do in the building. Thank you. And here is, oh, do you have any questions for me?
No, I was just going to say, the only thing I would say is if I were a 5th or 6th grade student or a 7th or 8th grade student, for some of the measures that we're talking about, I would say, I did what you told me to do. I did what you expected. And so I got that expected growth. What do you mean I need to do more than that? I mean, that's just what it feels like. I understand all of the pieces that go into it and all of the kids that we're trying to bring to more than a year's growth because maybe they need it. But it's one of those things that the kids used to say to me, it's not fair. And that's the piece of it that feels like. So, you know, it's really good to hear the work that you're doing to make those steps, even though you've done what you were supposed to do. Now, here's what we're going to do more that we're supposed to do.
Correct. All right, here is Mr. David Knapp.
Julie, good evening. David Knapp, principal of Loveland Middle School. Kevin Fancher joined us tonight, not because he had his daughter's soccer game. Well, he had that, but he really wanted to join Mr. Reed, Mrs. Carter, and myself in the finale of the 3-part series, right? We're proud to be here tonight talking about our awesome students. You know, Mr. Schumacher led with us this morning about, you know, congratulations to our kiddos. They did an awesome job. You know, throughout the past few years, it's obviously been challenging, but our kids have done a wonderful job. We're super proud of them. We're proud of our staff. LMS, you know, we are, like LAS, we're looking at really 3 areas of rating on the report card. You know, speaking very proudly of the really great work of our LMS teachers, our paraprofessionals, our student support staff. It takes a village in schools, we know that, and we're really proud of where we're at this year with our report card, and I'm happy to talk to you all about that progress tonight. Focusing first on that achievement rating, as Julie alluded to, the achievement piece is really looking at how well are our students doing on the tests themselves. They score different levels based on their scores of those tests. Those levels then factor in to your performance index score. So when you look at our performance index score for Loveland Middle School, we were at 98.18, which translates to a 90% on that performance index. When you look over at the graph on the left, ultimately what you're going to see is you're going to see a breakdown of our students and where they scored cumulatively across all of our tested areas at the middle school, within math, within ELA, and with science for 8th grade. Just to break that down a little bit more, just because those numbers aren't up there, our advanced, which is the highest, aside from advanced plus, which is more gifted related, we were at 32% of our students scoring there, 26% accomplished, proficient 20%, basic 10%, and limited 10%. Where that performance index score comes from is each of those categories is weighted a different way. So you think about the proficient score. A proficient has a weighted score of 1.0. You drop down to a basic, you're going to have a 0.6. That's where those numbers come from. It takes a little bit of math to factor into that. But one thing I do want to call out is that our performance index score, looking at the previous year, we were at a 78.7. We jumped up to a 98.18 this year. So we're pretty excited about that. That's a huge gain, obviously, and that's something to celebrate. So we're very happy about those achievement results. Moving on to the progress piece, Mr. Carter covered this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on where it's coming from, but ultimately now, achievements looking at how well students performed, progress is looking at student growth. How much are individual students growing within our schools? We are at 5 stars, which means that we have significant evidence that those students are exceeding growth expectations by a larger magnitude. So we're really excited about that. When you think about our progress piece, I'm sure you're familiar with value-added data and reporting. The progress piece is something that's newer in the report card, but educators have looked at progress data, as long as data has been around. That value-added data piece is traditional for us to look at. And just to update you all, that value-added data component, the part of it that changed this year was the colors. And it went from a green, everything's changing, right? From grades to stars, from colors are changing. But instead of green, red, yellow, we're now looking at blue, green, yellow. And I got to say, when I logged into our value-added data for the first time, I saw a bunch of blue, and in my mind, and maybe it's from the Inside Out movies that I'm always watching at home because I've got little ones at home. Pixar movie Blue is sad, right? So I saw the blue and I was like, oh no, what does that mean? Blue is actually really good. So we're excited about our value-added data and about our progress, and those things are related, which you're now seeing in the report card as well. Next slide, please. The gap closing piece is, I know Ms. Carter spent some time talking about this. I want to say the gap closing piece is always one of the hardest pieces for us to reach in terms of those report card metrics. So, I think what we're seeing as a district, obviously, being 5 stars cumulative in that's something to celebrate. So I want to talk a little bit about our data as it relates to that gap closing piece. I'll start also, next slide please, I'll start also where Julie started, talking about our gifted indicator, our gifted data. Our gifted, we did not, so even though it's small up there, we did not meet the gifted performance index, but we just missed it. That performance index for our gifted is at a much higher mark for what you have to reach, and this is just looking at how your gifted students performed on their tests, than it is for our general PI score. So the passing score for gifted PI performance index is 117. We were at 115. The percentage passing is 95%. We were at 94.9. So we're talking, a few kids in terms of moving them up that achievement ladder from proficient to accomplished to advanced. So we've got a little bit of work to do there, but we've got some good places to start. I also want to note that for achievement, we met every subgroup at the middle school and the previous year. So if you look at our subgroups, we had 7 accounted for this year. We were perfect there for achievement. Last year, we were at 4 of 8 subgroups. So again, looking at the great work that our staff has done is very evident in the gains that we've seen with that data there. I will echo Mrs. Carter's thoughts. We do, when we look at our subgroup data around our progress component of the gap closing pieces, that's where we have a little bit more work to do. So our students are achieving within that category. They're just not growing at the calculation that is being used to indicate those scores on there. So, when you think about the work that we're doing around our enrichment bells, LMS moved towards a teaming model this year, which allowed us to kind of rethink how we were scheduling students. It did allow us the opportunity not only to have enrichment ELA bells for our students, which is an additional 45 minutes of instruction for those students who need that enrichment, but we were also able to integrate a math enrichment bell into our schedule as well, which we were not able to do beforehand. So as far as efficiency and as far as making the most out of the limited staff that we have, we feel that we've been able to provide supports in a more efficient way to really capitalize on what we're seeing with our data. So we're excited about what the outcomes that are going to come from that too. And I just want to end it with, again, just a kudos and acknowledgement to our staff. They dig into the data. We just spent time looking at our EVOS, our value-added data, drilling through, all of our teachers, looking at all of their students, looking at where they're falling, looking at those scores, looking at the opportunities for growth. We just finished first quarter, and we're excited about the rest of the work we have to do this year to continue to dig in and support our kids. It's all for LMS.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all.
All right. Good evening. I'm Adam Reed, the principal at the high school.
wow, how do you compete with those 3 presentations? And you're the last one to go. So we too at the high school just have so much to celebrate with our rating and with this report card. I will start with really echoing pretty much all they said. Your support for our staff at the high school does not go unnoticed. I can't tell you how much our teachers value you and what you do for us. So thank you for that. I think that's been such a huge thing. You know, at the end of last year, coming to this school year, really has helped us out for a great year. You know, when you look at the younger grades, I mean, they send us students who are just flat ready to learn. And so our job is just to push them to the next level. And as you can see by our report card, that's certainly what our teachers were able to do. And we cannot be more proud of our teachers and of course our students. We'll jump right into ours again with the EOC scores. You know, David, Julie, they explained it. What I really am proud of is the work that our teachers did within the classroom. I think one of the things that you look at end of course scores or state tests, you always try to prepare students for those. And a lot of times it was, hey, let's do it after school. And what you realize very quickly is a high school student is just too busy. So the work of our teachers, our department chairs, our building leadership team really focused on making sure that we were preparing students within the classroom, within the curriculum, so that you could see this success that we were able to get. If you keep going, Adam. So again, you're looking at achievement. One of the big focuses this year now is drilling down to, you know, why are our students here and who are those students that reach that basic limited level? How did we miss them and what can we do differently this year? And that work has really begun with Dr. Orso, who has come and spoken to our staff. She has met with my administrative team to really start to identify these kids and say, you know, sometimes there's a reason, and that's what we're really focused on. And so our achievement score of 90.2%, again, is outstanding. It's a testament to the work. But we also are made changes this year. We have implemented enrichment EOC prep for the first semester for our students. In a little bit, we'll talk about gap achievement with our ELL English class to try to meet that measure, to making sure those students are getting the support that they need. So little changes like that, I really think are going to make us to continue to grow and to meet these benchmarks. Again, as everybody has talked about, our Ohio State test, the growth continues to be at a 5-star. And again, that's just goes to the work of our teachers. And again, gap closing. Really, I also want to bring in the counselor piece to this. Our counselors, our intervention specialists are all diving into these subgroups of students and who are our students and how do we meet their needs. I know David mentioned the mental health component, absolutely huge. We're working with Life Pantry to get that to the high school so that we're making sure our students are fed at night and over the weekend. We haven't had that in several years. So we really believe the academic piece on top of taking care of the whole child is going to continue to make this score grow. And as I mentioned, we do have an ELL course for our learners so that they can continue to grow in their area as well. And again, gap closing, David, Julie have talked through that with the high school. You've seen it, you see our numbers. We're extremely happy with where we landed with that. But again, we'll continue to focus on those students to make sure that they're meeting the benchmark that's needed. And graduation rate, obviously extremely important to us. I cannot stress the amount of work that our counseling department does to help our students get across that CENTAS stage, meeting with students really as early as January to make sure that they have their credits, working with teachers to make sure we have those alternate pathways to graduation. So true testament to the work that they do. And obviously our goal is to continue to keep that graduation rate as high as possible. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's really good to hear from all the buildings. Dr. Orso, the good news is you've just come to us just recently, and these administrators have shown that they've been doing good work to get us to this point. The bad news is, you know, you've made this progress, Now we want +2 progress next year. It's not like you can just do, I know it's not fair, but you can't just do what is expected and, you know, you understand what I'm saying.
And that's some of the work that we've been working on with the administrators of the buildings and identifying some of those opportunities for growth. We certainly want to celebrate all of the great things because there's a lot to celebrate, but there's always opportunity for growth. And so that's some of the conversations that we've been having and really diving into who are those individual students and where are they sitting in whose classrooms and what can we do to continue to push them so that we can reach those levels.
If I were to jump in for 1 second, I just want to say thank you to our building principals. I think we always like numbers. I think sometimes people say I like numbers too much, being the math guy, but it does come down to relationships as well. And what our building administrators do is just put in the time, they put in the work. The individuals that presented tonight, the best part of my job is cruising around the district and seeing kids and teachers. And today, just an example, I went to the high school. Adam and his 2 assistant principals are sitting at a table out in the hallway to meet and greet kids in between class. I got to sit, and that's building relationships so that when you do have to ask kids to go the extra mile, they're there for you. They know you. And Julie Carter, I was at the intermediate school today to draw a ticket, and she said, "Hey, you want to meet some kids in my office?" And what she does, there's a young man who's convalescing from a surgery, and 3 of his best buds are in there in her office, in the principal's office, hanging out. She's giving them some treats, and that's building relationships. That's what it's about. But and Mr. Knapp, I thank you for doing the teaming. It's something that it would be very easy to not do. It's hard to do because you're moving a lot of cheese, right? But to be able to increase the instructional time without additional support staff goes a long way because you have a relationship with your staff and you're able to show them that if it helps kids, then it's good to do. And I appreciate you doing that. And Mr. Fancher, I think, may have left, but there's no better guru of taking care of kids than Mr. Fancher and being able to identify the students. So not to go on too long, but I appreciate what our building administrators do, and it's a lot of work, and I appreciate it.
Any questions?
Can I just add, again, thanks for the wonderful reporting and the wonderful work that you're doing. Just thinking from a board perspective, you know, what we take away from this, 2 themes that I heard are intervention support and gifted support, like kind of the 2 ends of the spectrum. It seems like we're really doing well in the middle, those 2 ends where we see opportunities. And from a board perspective, you know, where do we allocate resources? We have allocated ESSER funds and in intervention now. We know even if we pass this levy, we're going to continue to have challenges in terms of funding and growing that. And so, you know, for me, from a board perspective, that's what I was hearing, and I wanted to know, is that, am I on target? Am I hearing this correctly? And, you know, is that where we want to continue to focus efforts? And 2 other thoughts. One, great, how do we maximize current staff scheduling, as you're talking about, but also doing more training, helping them to have more tools in their tool belt to do that work. But the other thing that I think is exciting, thinking about our plan that we came up with the community, is how can we leverage this wonderfully supportive community to help us in some of these things as well? Are there ways that we can be training volunteers to help us, particularly with things like reading? Are there things that we can do enrichment-wise with gifted kids at the high school that's utilizing folks from the community? That's another place I think there's potentially an opportunity to grow things. And so just wanted to throw all that out there and see if you had reaction to that, and if it sounds like we're on track or not. We're on different pages.
I think you're right on point with the takeaways from the last 3 sessions that we've had. And those are very much aligned to the same conversations that I've had with each of the principals at each of the buildings whenever we dig into some of that data, and the teachers too. I did a presentation at LHS yesterday to the whole staff, and I think it was a little bit enlightening for some of them because they've never really done a deep dive into the report card, because you really have to dig in to understand it completely. And so I think some of the aha moments for them too were, oh, we could have a student who hits us or helps us in multiple subgroups, because if you have a student who is, for example, African American and or economically disadvantaged and or on an IEP, they're going to hit you in all three of those categories, positively or negatively. And so just being aware of some of that too is very useful.
I guess one other thought too, this is probably in your plate more than any other, is thinking about your role and the fact that in other districts, there might be 2 or 3 folks that are in that role. We talk about how limited our administrative dollars are in our district. And, you know, we talked about this when we talked about technology, are we making sure that because we invest so much in our technology, do we have the person that's there to help us to make sure that our technology is working? For instance, you know, meeting software.
Bad example.
Well, good example. You know, we've invested in that. We want it to work. We have someone that can help to make sure it works. So that's good. So it's likewise, you know, do we as a board, do we think about how we allocate resources? Do we have enough resources in that role and those roles that multiple roles you're playing so that you can do the work you are? So make sure our staff are our biggest investment that we make so we can maximize their ability to provide what they need to in the classroom. So I think that's just another issue to think about as a board.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, the gifted piece, if we go back to that, I've heard from, just the gifted position was cut with the last round of cuts. I've heard from a lot of parents wondering where that's at, will that come back? And so talking to Dr. Orso, we know there's a want, is there a need? And so let's look, and I think some of the data tonight, you can say, well, looks like there might be a need. And so we're gonna look at that data if we have the ability to determine a little bit of flexibility in the staff. The one thing I think our community and the Board of Education need to realize how well this district is set up functionally as well as operationally when you have the grade band set up the way we do. We have, Mr. Fancher has all of our first graders, all of our second graders, coming from a district where you had 6 different elementaries. When you are trying to move everybody in one direction, it's difficult. So a lot of our professional development is more successful in the building because you have all your teachers there, versus if you had 3 or 4 different elementaries, you have to bring those people out of the building and professionally develop them. So I think kudos need to be given to the history of Loveland and how we are set up, because it affords us to run this operationally pretty lean and still do some pretty good things. If you look at what David was able to achieve in just a summer of planning and teaming, that doesn't happen everywhere. That's a lot of work. And it's because there has been forethought in how some of this has been set up. So I think when I look at the supports, because we did so well in the report card, I think at central office we work hard, but we're okay. I think it's building support. And kids, somebody spoke this evening about making sure that we have supports in the building, and that would be job number 1, is making sure we have the supports for the kids. And then also relating it to what you said, Reverend Ireland, with the strategic vision. We heard about gifted, we heard about mental health, we also heard about career pathways, and that's kind of the road you were going down. And so looking at that, but we would love to have the opportunity, we'd be excited if we had the opportunity to investigate what we could do a little bit more for the kids.